Afternoon, everyone. Happy Friday. And yes, we've actually got some Happy Friday news today. We're going to do a Happy Friday news day. But I am going to begin, although this is also within the remit of Happy Friday. So Wig has posted there, Kevin Walsh is a possible replacement for Jerome Powell. So I will go over this. I'll just explain for those who don't know what the hell we're talking about here. So Jerome Powell is the current head of the Federal Reserve, which is the central bank of America. So the most powerful central bank in the world, really. And he's up for replacement. Donald Trump, of course, as the president, gets to decide who replaces him. Now, although Donald Trump selected Jerome Powell in the first place in his first term, they have long terms. It's like he's like our governor of the Bank of England, but this is for the Bank of America, basically, but not Bank of America, Federal Reserve. Bank of America is a different thing. That's commercial. And but Trump has been pissed off with Powell, and he's because he hasn't been chopping interest rates as quickly as Trump. He has been reducing interest rates, but not as quickly as Trump would like. But that's Trump's fault because he kept throwing massive uncertainty into the US economy last year. Right, the Federal Reserve didn't know whether it was safe to cut interest rates as often as they might otherwise have done. But anyway, the danger is that Trump fills the Federal Reserve full of stooges, right, who will just do what he says. When he says, I want the interest rates lower, they will lower the interest rates, right? And then you end up with massive inflation. And that would be bad for all of us. That's bad for everyone. So this it's not been official yet, but so we're there saying Kevin Walsh is a possible replacement. So he has always been a possible replacement. I see from the news he seems to be the very likely replacement. People think he is actually going to be appointed. He is actually, although he's sort of aligned with Trump, he's actually considered to be a good replacement for Powell because again he's eminently qualified. He's been at the Federal Reserve. He was instrumental in managing America's reaction to the banking crisis, for example. So he's definitely qualified. Doesn't necessarily mean the best person for the job, but at the end of the day, political appointments, best person for the job doesn't always enter into it, does it? In fact, doesn't usually enter into it. But as he's not considered a stooge. So investors would be quite happy with that. In fact, we've seen signs of it because the price of gold has gone down, and that's a bit of a sign that they're going, oh, let's get into some investments now. We're looking safer. So that would be considered a good thing. Now, here's the thing. Here's the interesting thing about this fella, right? Kevin Walsh, right? You ask yourself, Trump clearly wants to get political control of the Federal Reserve. So why is he potentially or probably going to appoint someone who, is aligned with him, but isn't just going to be his puppet in the Federal Reserve, right? Why is he appointing someone who could just end up being like Jerome Powell and Trump will be raging at in a couple of years? A couple of things. First of all, I think Republicans in the Senate who have to confirm the appointment, remember, will have been going, we need someone credible, Mr. President, otherwise the stock market will go tits up. So they've presumably been lobbying quite hard, and Senate Republicans will be more than happy to confirm this guy. In fact, Senate Democrats may well be perfectly happy as well. But the other thing is this fella, Kevin Walsh, is the son-in-law of someone quite interesting. He's the son-in-law of the guy who persuaded Trump that he should take Greenland into American ownership. So here's what I'm thinking. It's pure speculation on my part. I've not seen anyone say this, but here's what I'm thinking. What you've got here is a bit of nepotism. Maybe Trump thinks, because this guy who persuaded him that he should have Greenland is a very close friend of his, by the way. So Trump appointing the son-in-law of a close friend, he may think there's that like family connection type thing, like a mafia type thing, and he will be more pliable. So maybe Trump thinks he's getting someone who is going to basically do what he says. I don't know. That's possible. That's what I'm thinking. So it looks like Lisa Cook will keep her job too. Yeah, Trump was trying to sack her. But anyway, it is what it is. And yes, hopefully the tariffs emergency powers is revoked. Again, the Supreme Court seemed to be dragging their heels on that one. I strongly suspect they were waiting for a moment of low political pressure to announce it. I don't think they wanted to announce it when Trump was threatening tariffs over Greenland, for example. MZ saying the Estee Lauder connection. Yeah. He's this Walsh guy is married to the granddaughter of the person who's of the Estee Lauder thing. Yeah. But anyway, right. On to some other. I mean, that's good news. That's a good start to a happy Friday. We've got some other news as well. Now, first of all, let's start with this one. Homicides at lowest level in nearly 50 years, ONS says. Now, this is interesting, isn't it? Because if you listen to the news from the far right particularly, but, you know, not all of the right-wing press lean into this. That's why I say the far right in this case. I'm not saying all right-wing press is far right, but some of it is. And if you listen to them, Britain is descending into this like lawless anarchy, and you're gonna have to lock yourselves behind your doors, and you're gonna need a rifle and all sorts to protect yourself. It's like Mad Max days, the dystopian days of Mad Max. And of course, Trump has tried. They're doing it all over. Again, we know that it's connected because exactly the same stuff that the far right groups are saying in Britain, they're saying the same in America about America. And Trump said this. I mean, he said it about London here. That's because he doesn't like a Muslim mayor. Although he did say it when Boris Johnson was mayor as well. But he says it about American cities, obviously only democratic cities. Don't say it about Republican cities. Not that there's many of them. And so much crime. That's why we're having to send ICE in, because there's too much crime, too much violent crime. And yet everywhere he's sent in federal agents and forces, you look at the data and you go, hang on a minute, violent crime's falling actually quite rapidly. And the same thing here. Homicides have fallen to their lowest level for nearly 50 years across England and Wales, official statistics shows. Obviously, Northern Ireland and Scotland have their own policing, so they have their own statistics, right? And you can look at it. I'm going to show you something, because this is interesting in terms of the so-called party of law and order as well, right? I'm not saying this was all Labour as such in terms of the current decline, but I'm going to say this. Look at this, right? Look what happens. So crime rising through the 70s, through the 80s, right? Gets to an absolute... So Labour come to power roughly there-ish. Carries on climbing because obviously a new government comes in after... This was, what did we have? 18 years of Tory rule. And takes a... But then it falls really very rapidly. Look at this. Very rapid decline. And you can see that in lots of other violent crimes as well when Labour were last in power. A very rapid... I mean, all the way through the Tory years. So they came to power... Thatcher came to power around about there. All the way through. Rising. Labour come in, bosh. Then the Tories come in. Austerity. Sack a load of police officers. Oh, no, we've got a load of extra murders. Well, who'd have thought that would have happened? Then it stabilised. It didn't carry on rising all the way like it did in the 80s, at least. But it didn't half jump up. As soon as the Tories came to power, it didn't half jump up. And it does that. And then it starts to come down a bit after the pandemic and so on. So, just to put in context, the falling rate was already technically started by the Tories. But that might have something to do with the fact that they decided to hire a load of police officers again, maybe, after chopping them all for ages. So we had this period, this decade period of elevated murders again because of austerity, basically. But something else as well. Because you would think this would be hailed as great news, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? The Daily Telegraph have attempted to try and work out how this is a bad thing. Look at this, right? This is the Daily Telegraph headline on it. So they've had to do that, right? They've had to do that. This is what they've had to put in. Murder rate lowest in 40 years. It's 50 years, by the way. It's 50 years. So first of all, I don't know why they're even downplaying it, because 40 years, 50 years, it's a long period of time either way, isn't it? But it's a 50-year low, right? Anyway, it doesn't matter about that. That's not what I'm going to talk about. Murder rate lowest in 40 years as more people stay at home. So this is James actually said this is hilarious. This is hilarious, right? This is, I don't really talk about this, but this is, look, so what they're trying to say is, it's only because people are staying at home. Most murders are carried out in the home. Like, if anything, that would increase the rate of murders. More people. I don't know whether more people are staying at home. I can believe it. I know more young people are. I know the press, particularly the right-wing press, has been moaning about, but lots of the press have been commenting on the fact that a lot of young people aren't going out drinking these days. Sounds very sensible to me. Stay at home playing computer games. Great. Fantastic. But nonetheless, yeah. The younger generation don't go out as much. It doesn't necessarily mean they're at home. They could just be going out with their friends to, like, you know, it's cheaper to go to each other's houses than it is bloody. I've never understood the pub. I got the pub thing like generations ago. I don't really get the pub thing now. I don't. It's almost. It is just like a cultural thing, isn't it? Because from a practical point of view, I don't see. And I'm apologies to any publicans who are going, "You're not helping us, Phil." But I don't. And I know I have a very like what do you go to the pub for? If you think about it logically, you go to the pub to have a drink. We can have a drink at home. I mean, there was a time when it weren't that easy to go out and just get beer for your home, but now we have like fridges and supermarkets. It's easy, so you can go out and you can have your drinks, and it'll be cheaper. And it's like, well, to socialise. Well, invite some people round, or go round to whoever's house doesn't have the kids if you want to get like a bit boorish and drunk, right? So I just see limited appeal in a pub. Now, there are some very good pubs. Now, there's a pub near me where they do food and it has a proper cook. It's none of this shit that you get in chain pubs. It's a proper cook. It cooks. I have this problem with going out and to a restaurant or a pub or something and ordering food that is cooked to a lower standard than I would do it at home. I resent paying particularly a lot of money for food that has been cooked to a lower standard than I would do at home. Whereas the pub down the road from me, very good. Does very good stuff. Very nice. Proper cook. Proper trained chef. So that's that. But your bog standard pub, I don't get it. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is that murders aren't in pubs very often. They're in the home. Most are in the home. In fact, when it comes to the murder of women, the vast majority in the home. So this is bollocks. James, they're saying, I love the pub. Me, come from a long line of alcoholics. Well, I don't know if I come from a long line of alcoholics. I know my dad drank a lot. I drank a lot when I was at university, but I snapped out of it when I left. Teacher, you see, you're not really supposed to turn up to class drunk. I say you're not supposed to. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I decided to take a little bit of responsibility and didn't decide to be an alcoholic. There are a lot of alcoholic teachers. It's a very stressful job, but, you know, I decided not to go down that path myself. So I almost never drink. Very rare I drink. I've had one glass of port since Christmas. That's it. That's my drinking of the year so far. Yeah, it's crazy. I saw a similar headline saying millennials don't cheat on their partners because they're too lazy. Can't possibly that they care for their partners. Well, this is it though, isn't it? It's absolutely mad. They go on for ages about, descent to violence is disgraceful. The country's going to the dogs. Lowest murder rate in, it's 50 years, mate. It's technically 49 because it's 1977 they're comparing. So technically you can say 49 if you want to be, but it's way close to 50 years than 40 years. So they're even trying to, they're so begrudging of this news. They so hate the fact that you've got, there's some good news in the country. They have to comment on it, but they have to try and spin it as if somehow it's bad. Oh, it's because people are going out. It's actually not a good thing if you think about it. This is like, actually, this is the opposite of, you remember when Priti Patela's Home Secretary was hailing the fact that burglaries were not an all-time low, but they dramatically reduced during 2020. And people said, that's because no one went out, you silly cow. Do you remember that? They're trying to do the same thing here. Oh, it's because people aren't going out. But murders happen mostly in the home. That's when most murders happen. Most murders are carried out within social groups in the home. Doesn't fit them, does it? So they've got to find out some way. But anyway, That's on the violent crime front. And we saw from the data from London specifically, Sadiq Khan, a couple of weeks ago, was hailing the massive reduction in various types of crime, but violent crime was very much down as well. Did I ever show up to class hungover at least? No. I will give you one little anecdote because I'm probably safe now. So when I was doing my teacher training, so I hadn't gone into any schools yet. You do your classroom-based stuff first. And then I was going to go to my first teaching practice, right? So we just went there one day. It was in Oldham. And we weren't going to do any teaching on day one. We're just going there for a look around and stuff like that and make sure we know what was going on, right? Now, I was on the Residents Association of the halls where I was living at the time at university. And the night before, they'd had a bit of a winey do, right? And there was this nice Chilean red wine that no one else seemed to like. So I had rather too much because I thought it was quite nice. So I had rather too much of it. So basically the next day I was still drunk, if I'm honest. Don't worry, I didn't drive. I got the bus. 3 buses, actually. I had to get 3 buses to get to Oldham. And I was not staggering or anything, but I'd had enough alcohol that I knew that I was still drunk the next day. So I never did that again, by the way. So we're being shown around. And then at one point we're in the science lab of the head of science, right? And he has a phone call in the prep room. So he goes to answer that. And I'm feeling really sick at this point. So I go, oh no. So I will go over to one of the sinks in the site and I'm sick in the sink and I turn the tap on to flush it down quickly like that, right? And I come back. The other trainee teacher's pissing herself laughing. I shut up. And so obviously I've just been sick, so my eyes are like a little bit leaky, right? And so the head of science comes back in. He looks at me and says, "Oh, you got a cold or something?" I went, "That's a good idea, yeah." And this grass of a student teacher, the other one, didn't tell on me, but she did tell later on at the end of the year. She did tell the chief technician, the head technician, and I did say to her, "You cannot tell the head of science because he's not someone who would see the funny side of it." I said, "You cannot tell him. I need him for a reference." So hopefully she never did. But anyway, so pubs were popular because there wasn't much else to do. Yeah, now there's plenty of options, but no support to make them well-known and affordable. Less pubs, more investment in other activities. Yeah, I mean, I honestly, there's certain things where people point to it, and the pub is a part of British culture. It is. So, I understand people, bemoaning the dearth of pubs these days. I mean, the village I grew up in, it was a big village, but it's still a village, right? There were 13 pubs in it when I was growing up. I think there's 2 now. I think there's 2. But again, it's like, because it doesn't really serve any great purpose anymore. Pubs cost way too much these days. So do many things. And it's not the fault of the pubs. Their business expenses have massively increased. Cost of energy, cost of food, cost of drinks. I mean, Brexit didn't help any of those things, but there were other pressures as well. But it's mad. But anyway, next one, right? So I just want to. So the other thing that is you're not going to see reported here, but I'm just going to go on. I just want to point something out here. I'm going to read something for the Financial Times. Now, imagine you're someone who only gets your news from the mainstream media, like the Telegraph, the Mail, maybe even just the BBC, although the BBC are not nearly as bad on this. I want to read out something that's in the Financial Times. Where was it now? Right, this is a little excerpt. Economists say 2025 was probably one of the strongest years for UK productivity growth since the global financial crisis of 2008. And I'll show you the chart on it as well. I'll show you the chart just to highlight what they're talking about. But this is not what you're led to believe, is it? If you read the mainstream media, you think that Labour are absolutely tanking the economy and they're, going to lead us to rack and ruin, and we'll be very lucky if we're not bankrupt by the next election, right? And then you look at it. I think this is in red probably because it'll be we always have to bear in mind these things are always provisional. You don't really get the way economic data's worked out. You usually get something after a couple of months, and then a few months later you'll have a revision. And then usually in the November of the following year, they'll have we're fairly confident this was the economic data for last year. And then maybe a few years later, there's another revision, right? Because data's always coming in. So it is provisional. But you can see here, this is growth in GDP per workforce job, right? Just to be clear, I've missed that off there, but I'll read off what this represents. Growth in real GDP per workforce job as a percentage, right? Oh, it's also saying the 2025, it's not just that it's provisional, it's also based on quarter 1 to 3 only. We don't have quarter 4 even provisional data. So it's we'll get a clearer picture by the end of the year. But you can look at this. Okay, you can see here 2020 was obviously tanked. Of course it was. We shut down. 2021 and 2022 were better, but again, it's a percentage growth. If you have a tanking, then the next year is obviously going to be amazing, right? So I want to point out the reason why, if I was to just say to you, economists are saying this is one of the strongest growth years since the crash. Someone might look at this chart if they don't know what they're looking at and go, well, hang on a minute, that one was better, that was better, that was better, that was better. What are you going on about? But look what's happened. So this big one here followed a crash. That was obviously the banking crash, right? So again, it's a percentage growth. If you have a crash, then even if you're not doing brilliant the next year, it will look really good. Same here. So the ones that follow a massive drop, that's just a statistical quirk. It just happened to follow. It's a bit like if someone's literally potless, they have no money, zero money, and then they find a fiver, they've massively increased their wealth. Whereas for most people, getting a fiver isn't going to be considered like a boon, is it? So the only years where, under the Tories it looked okay was this 2017. I think that is. That was the only decent year. Because these are following the pandemic. This is following the banking crisis. Whereas this one was following growth. Okay, it wasn't great growth the year before, but it's following a period of growth. It's not following a crash. And that's why economists are saying this is actually signs of really great strength. So Wiggs just said, we're still talking about pubs here, right? He's just said, you really need to know your pubs in London to find a good one or just get lucky. I have to confess, the last time I went to London, it was for my practical autism assessment. And because it was done, because I have to, when I go to London, I have to allow quite a lot of time because of train delays and stuff. And if you don't get a train delay, you're just going to get there really early. So I got there really early. So they assessed me really early. So that meant I had then loads of time to kill before my train back. So I'm walking down this street. It's out on the outskirts, like suburb type of areas, within London, but still, in a quietish area. And I'm walking down the street and there's a pub there, a sports pub. So it's a Saturday afternoon. So I go in to have some lunch and watch some football, right? That was a good pub. That was quite a nice pub. I had football on the telly, wasn't massively crowded, and did a nice meal. I had a nice little dinner, nice burger. So you can just get lucky, is what I'm saying. A lot of pub leases really badly stacked against publicans as well. Yeah. I mean, this is one of the problems as well. The other sort of dearth that people complain about is the high street. But again, and the high street is important. But at the same time, you also understand where the pressures are. The pressures are from online. Like most of us now, when I was growing up, if you needed something, there were mail order companies. And sometimes you would have to get something mail order. But you needed the physical mail order catalogue to know what you were ordering. There's no internet. I mean, the internet existed, but we didn't have it. Most people didn't have it. And you wouldn't find shops on it anyway, because most people didn't have it. So you'd need the mail order catalogue, and then you'd be allowing 28 days for delivery. Do you remember that? 28 days for delivery in UK and air, right? Is how it was phrased. So, whereas now you just go online. It's just much easier. It's a hassle to go into town. Well, it depends where you live, but it's a hassle to go into town. But at the same time, there are plenty of places that would like to use premises on the high street, even if it just be charities or smaller, smaller stores that can make a viable living on the high street, but they can't pay the extortionate rents. And what really needs to happen, if the government wants to sell the high street out, I'm not claiming to be an expert on high streets, by the way. It's not the waters I usually swim in, because, but what I would say is what governments need to do is force people who own properties on high streets to occupy them. Actually pass a law that says you have to occupy these, right? And that means you'll just have to take whatever rent you can get. Market forces. The Tories can't complain about that, can they? Right? Why didn't the Tories do that? Market forces. You will charge whatever rent you think you can get. And so put the onus on and charge them high rates of tax for unoccupied properties on not everywhere, but on a high street because the problem is, and again, this is known, there was another report recently. If people walk down their high street and they see boarded up shops, it makes them think that their local economy is not doing well. We know there's a direct correlation with boarded up high street shops and people's feeling of their area being like run down and knackered, right? So what I would do, I'd like to know what is the problem with this. Put the owner, designate high streets, right? Just make sure there's a legal definition of what is and is not a high street. It should be easy. Most of them are actually called high street. And just say, if you own a commercial property on it, it has to be, all properties on a high street have to be occupied. And if they're not occupied, you are going to be charged a high, and I mean a high rate of tax, to the point where it's punitive, right? Punitive rate of tax. And if it's unoccupied for above a certain length of time, then you're on notice. You have to rent it out at whatever you can get it. And if you don't, then the property can be sort of, I don't know, that might be difficult seizing property, because it's sort of like, how do you do it without it being actual theft? But I do think, at the very least, very punitive taxes for unoccupied properties. Real issue is energy costs are still overinflated due to marginal pricing. Energy prices are hideous, particularly because, again, just to point out, the price you pay for electricity as a business owner is not the same as we do at home, right? If you run a pub or a restaurant or an engineering firm, you pay a much higher rate per kilowatt hour. And you do in a lot of countries, to be honest. Not in Spain. Spain's interesting. Spain has the same flat rate. But in a lot of countries, there's a separate business rate, but it's ridiculously high. It's much higher than in America or France or Germany. And Labour did put in their industrial strategy when they published it, that one of the biggest things they're seeking to do as part of their industrial strategy is get the cost of energy down for businesses. That's like it seemed to me reading it, I don't think they did number things as such, but my impression reading the industrial strategy was they seem to be saying as a priority they need to get business energy rates down. Which is why they're doing various things like, trying to rejoin the EU single market for energy. That's part of it. Of course, transitioning to green, clean energy as well. And Ned's just saying there's a big issue with property ownership becoming concentrated. Even though there are empty shops, the rents are often still very high. Yes. So one thing they could do and should do is Dutch auctions. So the way this works is, again, if you have a compulsion, if there's a property on a high street, it must be occupied. the owner has a legal duty to occupy it, right? And if it's and the reason why they often don't is you might have someone who owns 6 properties on the high street, right? And maybe 4 of them are empty, but the 2 that are not, it's like they get more money from having 2 of the 6 occupied than they would lowering their rents and getting the others occupied. So what some places do, not in this, but what some places do, is you do a Dutch auction where it's like people who want to be on the high street bid a certain amount of rent and you just have to take the highest. I think it might be a blind auction. I'm not sure how it works in practice, but the idea is you just have to auction off your rentals and you just take whatever you can get, which means if there's a lot of demand for it, then you're going to get high rent. If there's poor demand for it, maybe not so much, but you have to take it. You could probably say, a bare minimum to stop someone taking the piss and getting it for free. So you could say, I don't know what would be considered a reasonable low, a reasonable cap, floor for what you can charge. But that, for me, if a government was serious about regenerating the high street, and again, I will point out, I'm not an expert here, but I would say they could do a lot worse than put in some carrots and sticks to force occupancy. So work for a charity. Our standing charge is several hundred a month. I mean, the standing charge needs just going. There's no justification for it. So I'm pleasantly surprised at Green's confirmed candidate, local plumber Hannah Spencer. Well, she's also established for the Gorton Denton, but yeah, she's established. She was their mayoral election candidate as well. So she's established within the Green Party there. So she's an obvious choice. She comes across direct and strong, good for Max. What, you mean she didn't call it a shithole like Matt Goodwin multiple times? Should be the same for owners of multiple empty properties. If they're empty for longer than 6 months, it should be fine. You could expand the concept, yes, to other things as well. And again, same thing. Again, and the Tories could have no complaints about it. They're actually more likely to complain about, but they're on the side of landlords, really. But they shouldn't, because it's market forces. It's like if you've got a property for rent, whether it's for a commercial property or housing, you have a duty to rent it out. If that's what it's for, you have a duty to rent it out. And if you're complaining that you can't get what you want from it, market forces, let the market decide. That's what they're always talking about. They're free marketeers, aren't they? Well, they should bloody well behave like it then. Board game cafes are great. It's like a pub restaurant with less loud, obnoxious and sticky paper. So things like that, yeah, I've noticed that you get things like that. They can serve some sort of useful purpose. I mean, you could still argue, I suppose, with pubs. Oh, but then you can get to meet people, stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, we have the internet for that these days. But okay, if you like. But again, it just doesn't surprise me that pubs are declining, because I just don't see the great need for them. Used to work in a bank branch that closed. The decision was made after the landlord upped the rent. Bank owned the premises in the next house. Of course, ours was closed. Well, yeah. I'm curious as to what's supposed to be happening, because Labour was supposed to be massively expanding banking hubs, weren't they? I'm not sure what's happening on that, but that's something that's going to be sorely needed. But I've no idea if there's any progress being made on that. Pubs is where MTG, that'd be Magic the Gathering, used to be played. Now we have LGSs. I don't even know what that is now. But anyway, I shall leave it there. Run out of time. I just thought I would share some actual good news on this happy Friday. Not that you would know it from most of the mainstream media. Absolutely amazing to me. It is amazing to me that the so-called newspaper of the people, like your tabloids and stuff, if it reports on this stuff at all, it has to somehow spin it into something bad. Oh, the economy's doing great. Oh, that's terrible. Oh, murders are really low. Oh, that's awful. Oh, local game stores. I see what you mean. Sorry. But the other thing is you know, it's but the Financial Times, like I would have grown up thinking, you know, well, I'm thinking, right, I'd be right in thinking this. The Financial Times is written for people who, it's written for ultra capitalists. It's people who, it's literally written to advise people who have capital to invest. It's a capitalist newspaper, and yet it it contains the news that you would think means it's got like this left wing, if not Marxist, then at least socialist bent. And it's like, no, they just report the truth because their business model requires them to be honest. That's why. It requires them to be honest because the people buying the Financial Times need honest, accurate information to make big decisions, right? Very, very high stakes decisions. Whereas the Telegraph and the Mail and anything like that, you know, nobody's basing like their investments or their job applications on what they read in the Telegraph or the Mail. So they just get to talk shit all the time and nothing comes back on them. Why Labour needs to get a grip on the messaging? Yeah, they do. They 100% do. Unfortunately, Starmer's not doing. And I've no reason to believe, unfortunately, that any of the credible replacements would either, because there's only 2 Labour MPs, as far as I can tell, even think social media is worth pursuing. And neither of them are doing it well. They're at least just showing some signs that they think it's worth pursuing. That's it. So it's maddening. MPs just do not see the value in social media for communicating to the public. I don't even know how to describe how stupid that is, how ignorant that is, how out of touch that is. But it is what it is. So Star was on a podcast this weekend about a year and a half late. Well, appearing on other people's things, great, sure, why not? They should do their own. They should do their own. I was talking about this on my upper members tier stream on Wednesday. I may do another separate video on it, but it'll not get many views, so maybe I will, maybe I won't. We'll see. But anyway, we'll leave it there for now. Thanks for coming on, everyone. Have a great rest of Happy Monday. Friday, sorry, it's Happy Friday. It will be Happy Monday soon, don't worry. Unless, of course, Trump invades Iran, in which case, yeah. But thanks anyway. Have a great weekend. Until next time, I'll see you later.